Hi, welcome back to Think It Out. I'm Kenji Kuzu. This is a channel where I share my critical reviews of films, TV dramas, novels, and so on. All my reviews here include big spoilers, so please watch my videos only after you watch or read what I'm reviewing here. Today, I picked up Ryusuke Hamaguchi's 2021 film, Drive My Car, that won the Academy Award for Best International Feature Film this year, 2022. This is definitely a thought-provoking film with a lot of aspects to talk about. And there are already many reviews of it posted on YouTube and websites. But I noticed some of those reviews unfortunately missed the crucial point of the film. Of course, I'm not saying that they simply misunderstood the film or my view is absolutely right to capture the essence of the film. You can enjoy films in any way you like, of course. But from my understanding, this film is incredibly well thought out with so many aspects put together in multiple layers that you might lose sight of the crucial point in the complex structure. I believe this is a type of film you can enjoy more deeply if you watch it several times to look at every detail and ask yourself what it means. So, I hope my review can help you enjoy the film even more deeply when you watch it next time, like you enjoy a rich flavor of an old wine more deeply when you have another sip. Drive My Car is a story of Kafuku, a renowned stage director and actor who faces and comes to accept the betrayal and death of Otto, his wife, through directing and acting Anton Chekhov's play Uncle Vanya and interacting with Misaki, a driver of his car. This is a film adaptation of Haruki Murakami's short story, but the original short story is very short actually. So Hamaguchi incorporated some elements from other stories in the same short story collection titled Man Without Women, this book, to make this 3-hour-long film. From here, some elements of An Independent Organ, Sherazade, and Kino are incorporated into the film. And he also assigned a significant role to the play Uncle Vanya in the film. All of them are perfectly harmonized like a puzzle pieces put together to make a big picture. Especially the way Hamaguchi incorporated the Uncle Vanya is remarkable. In Murakami's original story, Uncle Vanya is mentioned only a couple of times. It's just part of the background that reflects the relationship between Kafuku and Misaki. Kafuku is like Vanya, and Misaki is like Sonia. That's it. But Hamaguchi uses many lines from the play as the lines that Kafuku practices for his acting. In a way, those lines reflect exactly what he's thinking in many scenes. And what he experiences through the play becomes a life-changing moment for him. This is the biggest difference from the original story, which I think many people missed in their reviews. In other words, Murakami kept Uncle Vanya separated from Kafuku's experience and used the play as a sort of mirror that reflects what Kafuku does. He never merged them in the story, but Hamaguchi made an experiment of putting them together to see what would happen. It's just like Murakami left gin, dry vermouth, and some olives separately on the kitchen counter, and Hamaguchi came in, picked them up, mixed them, and made a glass of good dry martini. I don't mean Murakami's original story is incomplete in any way. You can enjoy gin and vermouth separately, and there is a certain reason to separate Uncle Vanya and Kafuku's experience in the original story. But what's remarkable about Hamaguchi's version is that he used what's already given in the original to create something unexpected from the original. No surprise, this film won the award for Best Screenplay at the 2021 Cannes Film Festival. Okay, let's start. Today's review consists of 3 parts, which are: Number 1, the relationship between Kafuku and Otto. Number 2, the play Uncle Vanya. Number 3, body. Okay, let's start with number 1. The entire story of Drive My Car pivots on the ambiguity of Otto's persona and the ambiguity of the relationship between Kafuku and Otto thereby. And the film presents the ambiguity so effectively that from the very beginning, we can't really tell whether their marriage was already broken down or they were still deeply bonded with each other. Otto was obviously cheating on him, but at the same time, she had a sexual life with him. And their sexual life worked as a source of inspiration for Otto's TV drama. Even after they lost their daughter, which marked the end of their happy times, as Kafuku said, their sexual life was not over. On the contrary, their marriage entered the next stage where they created stories together as a substitute for their deceased daughter, which helped Otto regain herself and attain a social life with an occupation. So it's quite hard to think that she no longer had any feelings for Kafuku but had sex with him only for writing stories. You might think that the death of their daughter triggered something inside Otto, which Kafuku called a spot that I couldn't look into, where something dark swirled, and that made her sleep with other guys randomly. Actually, you can see Kafuku try not to look at that something covering his face with his arm when having sex with Otto. But that would make it even more difficult to put the two images of Otto together. It would look as if she was still deeply bonded with Kafuku, but quite consciously enjoyed her affairs with other guys. Thanks to the uniquely mysterious atmosphere the actress Reika Kirishima is wearing, we can't really figure out what kind of woman Otto was. One solution would be to think that Otto was suffering from the sense of guilt for cheating on him, because she couldn't control that something dark within herself. But that would ruin the whole point of the film. Why? Okay, let me ask you a question. Did Kafuku finally accept the betrayal and death of Otto because he realized what she was really thinking in the end? The answer is no. He couldn't know what she was really thinking until the very end. Rather, he finally accepted her betrayal because he was convinced that he could never know what she was really thinking. Otherwise, what Takatsuki and Misaki said to him would make no sense, and the entire film would lose the point. Remember the night drive scene where Takatsuki told Kafuku how Otto's story of a high school girl sneaking into a boy's room continued beyond the point where Kafuku thought it ended. He said, "Even if you think you know someone well, even if you love that person deeply, you can't completely look into that person's heart. You'll just feel hurt. But if you put in enough effort, you should be able to look into your own heart pretty well." So in the end, what we should be doing is to be true to our hearts and come to terms with it in a capable way. If you really want to look at someone, then your only option is to look at yourself squarely and deeply. All you can do is to stop ignoring your pain, anger, and despair deep inside and accept them exactly as your pain, your anger, and your despair. Maybe that's the only way you can be responsible for what happened and will be happening to you. After all, there should always be a blind spot in other people's minds, as Kafuku's glaucoma symbolizes. In other words, you should accept the partial unacceptability of other people. What Misaki told Kafuku in front of her collapsed old house in Hokkaido made the same point. She said, "Would it be hard for you to accept her, everything about her, as genuine? Maybe there was nothing mysterious about her. Would it be hard to think that she was simply like that she loved you dearly, and that she thought other men constantly don't seem to contradict each other or sound deceptive to me?" Misaki herself had gone through the same sort of pain, anger and despair in her relationship with her mother. Her mother had a persona of an 8-year-old girl called Sachi that often emerged after she abused Misaki. Whether Sachi was a real persona generated by her mental illness or she was in fact acting that persona was ultimately not so important for Misaki. What's important is that Misaki reached the point where she could accept both as equally real of her mother. So Takatsuki's and Misaki's words helped Kafuku finally realize that the seemingly inconsistent images of his wife were actually not contradictory. Oto really loved Kafuku, and she was repeatedly sleeping with other guys. That just happened. Therefore, it would be misleading if you said Oto felt guilty of cheating on Kafuku. That would mean you tried to reveal what she was really thinking. Actually, I saw many people trying to decipher what Oto's high school girl story really means. The girl symbolizes Oto. The neat and clean room she sneaked in is Kafuku's car that he controlled perfectly. The other intruder is Kafuku. The killing of the intruder symbolizes Oto's hidden hatred of Kafuku, and so on and so on. No, the whole point of the film is that you can move on to a next stage of life without finding the true meaning of what your tragedy means, and leaving ambiguity as ambiguous. Here, you might say, but how can you really say that? That's just your interpretation. Okay, now we are ready to move on to the second point, the role of the play Uncle Vanya in the film. Every key aspect of Drive My Car ultimately culminates in Kafuku's acceptance of himself, who accepts Oto's ambiguous identity. And Uncle Vanya plays a fundamental role for the acceptance. We can say this if we refer back to other films that Hamaguchi directed before this one. As you see, Kafuku used a unique method of directing the play, making actors read the script slowly without showing any emotions. This is what Hamaguchi himself does in directing films, including Drive My Car. And especially his 2015 film, Happy Hour, is the representative of the films created by this method. Hamaguchi gives a detailed account of the method in his book, Acting in Front of Cameras, this one. And unfortunately, this book is only available in Japanese right now. Here, he wrote about an improvisational acting workshop he held in Kobe, out of which Happy Hour was created. 4 women who play the protagonist in the film won the Best Actress Award at the 2015 Locarno Film Festival. And what's so amazing is that they had no experience of acting before the workshop, which means ordinary women just like us became award-winning actresses using that method. How did that happen? How did the emotionless reading help them invoke the world-level performances, winning an International Film Award? In this book, he said that method was actually the Italian reading that Jean Renoir used for his films. Renoir instructed actors to read their lines slowly again and again, as a child reads a phone book. They were given no time to remember their lines by understanding what the lines mean, so that they had no time to prepare their performances in a mundane, stereotypical way, such as making a sad face when a character feels sad. They swallowed and literally embodied the text without understanding the meaning of each word. This is similar to establishing a habitual behavior when you repeat the same action. For example, when you type a keyboard now, you don't think, now I'm going to type cinema, for example, so I move my left index finger, right middle finger, right index finger, and so on and so on. Once you master typing a keyboard, you can type it without consciously controlling your hands. You can move your hands as if your hands themselves move independently. You can let your body move. Hamaguchi says in this book that By repeating the lines without expressing emotions, actors become what he calls the textual human beings, which is a human being in a state that the text itself is absorbed deep inside his or her gut. You assimilate with the text itself as your hands themselves master how to type a keyboard. Then the director cues action. Actors start to act and react with each other in a way totally unprepared. Improvisations start this way. This is how he directs his films, and Drive My Car is the latest work using this method. That's also what Kafuku was doing with Uncle Vanya. In a scene where Janice realized that her performance was terrible, she clearly understood the importance of the Italian reading. Now she knows that you can invoke unprepared, non-stereotypical, and real acting if and only if you become a textual human being that thoroughly absorbs the lines by reading the text that way. In short, a purely improvisational and realistic acting is made possible if an actor takes two steps. First, the actor attains a certain body that assimilates with the text itself. Number two, the actor interacts with other actors through that body, as if the text itself acts through his or her body. The advice Kafuku gave to Takatsuki at the bar corresponds to these two steps. He said, yield yourself and respond to the text. The text is questioning you. If you listen to it and respond, the same will happen to you. First, you should yield yourself to the text, which means you accept and assimilate with the text. Then, number two, you respond to the text. You activate the text through interactions with other actors. In an interview session at the 59th New York Film Festival, Hamaguchi said, "Text is a very powerful tool. It's something that I most rely on as a tool. I have few things to do other than giving the text to my actors. Once I give my actors the text, I leave it all to them to interpret it. It doesn't happen to all text, but a particular kind of text can connect to performers and pull out the history of them or how they lived their lives. And if you think about the level of Chekhov's text, it has such a high, even too high quality of pulling out your history from you. That's why it's been performed for over a century." It is because text has the power of pulling out your authentic self that Kafuku tried to avoid playing Vanya after Otto's death. He didn't want to let himself be revealed by the text. Chekhov's text has such a power. So this is how the Italian reading method works. Incidentally, Yuna is another person who regained herself by listening to and responding to the text. She had lost herself after a traumatic miscarriage, but regained herself through the text. Okay, but what does that have to do with Kafuku's acceptance of Otto's betrayal and death? There is another important point that Hamaguchi makes in this book. He says that acting is essentially to bring about the paradox of selfhood, namely to be yourself and not yourself at the same time. He says, there is a paradox immanent in acting itself that actors and we face. She is not myself, but she is nothing but myself. For example, when you play Hamlet in front of a camera, even if you play it masterfully as Laurence Olivier did, what the camera captures is you masterfully playing Hamlet, and not Hamlet himself. We all know that. Camera is a device that captures everything in front of it, like an X-ray. You can hide nothing from it. Then, what you can or should do is to reveal yourself, who has already assimilated with the text, so that what's captured by the camera is neither yourself alone nor the text alone, but both at the same time. Sometimes, even though we know what the camera captures is actors, we are still moved by their great performances, because we experience this paradox as an audience. When Kafuku finally played Uncle Vanya, this paradox happened as his body had assimilated with Chekhov's text. The original power of the text was activated through Kafuku's body so that he and Vanya were no longer in a hierarchical order, with Kafuku being real and Vanya being not real. Both are equally real. Only at that level could he understand both of Oto's personas as equally real. This is the biggest difference from Murakami's original story. In the original, Kafuku didn't accept Oto's different personas in the way he did in the film. Okay, let me read the last part. Kafuku and Misaki are driving, and Kafuku still had trouble putting Oto's different images together. In fact, though, he was a man of little consequence. He had a good personality. He was handsome with a winning smile. He got along with everybody, but he wasn't someone who commanded much respect. He was a weak man and a second-rate actor. My wife, though, had a strong will and great depth of character. She was the type of person who could think things through on her own. So how could she fall for a nonentity like that and go to bed with him? It's still a thorn in my heart. Isn't it possible that your wife didn't fall for him at all? Misaki said simply, and that's why she slept with him. Kafuku looked at Misaki's profile as if gazing at a distant landscape. She worked the wipers a few times to remove the drops from the windshield. The newly installed blades squeaked like a pair of quibbling twins. Women can be like that, Misaki added. Kafuku couldn't think of what to say, so he kept silent. To me, it's a kind of sickness. Thinking about it doesn't do much good. The way my father walked out on my mother and me, my mother's constant abuse, I blame the sickness for those things. There's no logic involved. All I can do is accept what they did and try to get on with my life. So then we're all actors, Kafuku said. Yes, I think that's true, to a point anyway. After this, he tries to take a nap in the car and the story ends. The thorn in his heart was never removed. Misaki said women are like that. All he can do is to be an actor, namely to pretend not to be hurt. This is Murakami's signature moment where characters shrug their shoulders and say, "Great, just great." Kafuku in the film never does that. So we can say that the original story and the film are two radically different versions of Drive My Car. However, what Misaki said to Kafuku in the film is quite similar. She said there is no contradiction between Oto's different personas. Then, where does this huge difference come from? It's the meaning of acting. In the original, acting simply means pretending. You can never solve the contradiction, so just cover it up and pretend it's not a big issue, and shrug your shoulders. In the film, acting means attaining a paradoxical self. At a deeper level of acting, there is a space where radically different personas can coexist without contradiction. You act, but your body has already assimilated with the text, like your hands learn how to type a keyboard, so that when you speak your lines, it's no longer you alone that speaks the lines, but the character in the text speaks them, moving your body. If you act that way, you can remove the framework by which you see yourself as real and the character as non-real. You are no longer simply yourself. You are, as it were, your version of the character. In short, Kafuku in Murakami's version detached himself from Oto's double image and saw it as a problem and stopped thinking about it. Kafuku in Hamaguchi's version obtained the double image himself and saw Oto's double image as something acceptable. The director made Kafuku reach that point as an actor. That's why the original story ends before Kafuku actually performs the play. Hamaguchi unfolded what would happen after that if Kafuku used the Italian reading and experienced the paradox himself. Probably Kafuku would have accepted Oto in a deeper sense. As I said, Murakami left Kafuku and Uncle Vanya separate in his story, as if he left gin and vermouth separate and left the kitchen. Hamaguchi mixed them to make a glass of tasty dry martini. Finally, body. Drive My Car is ultimately a film about body. It's about the bodily experience of letting someone drive your car. What happens when you let someone drive your own car? It's a very intimate experience. You wouldn't let someone drive your car unless you trust that person. Especially for a person like Kafuku who wants to take total control of his car, letting someone else drive his own car wouldn't happen without trusting the driver. You would not only give up on the way you step on the accelerator or brakes, turn the steering wheel and so on, but you would also have to leave your life in the driver's hands. And on top of that, you share your bodily movements with the driver. Your body moves to the same direction as the driver's body. You hear the engine sound that the driver hears, and you feel the bumps and vibrations that the driver feels. Kafuku said he was satisfied with the way Misaki drove his car. They were listening to Oto's tape all the time in the car. He took closer seats to Misaki as the story got closer to the climax. And finally, their bodies synchronized in a symbolic gesture of holding up cigarettes from the sunroof, as if offering incense to Oto in mourning. Their synchronized bodies shared the perspective in the end, so that Kafuku accepted what Misaki had accepted, the paradox of selfhood. So, Drive My Car is a story of the transformation of Kafuku's body. This transformation can be seen in the different orientations of his body. After finding Oto having sex with a guy in his apartment, Kafuku had sex with her. He held her in the same position as the guy did, but her blank face and his slightly dubious face indicated the distance between them. He was literally facing her, but he could never know what she was thinking and who she really was. By contrast, in the climactic scene in Hokkaido, he hugged Misaki with his face in the opposite direction first, then in the same direction as hers. Of course, there's nothing sexual or romantic between Kafuku and Misaki. Kafuku's deceased daughter would have been at the same age as Misaki, so they're like a father and a daughter. What's indicated here is that Oto's mind was ultimately unknown to Kafuku, and that Kafuku and Misaki were headed to the same kind of future as a result of driving together. After that, Kafuku plays Uncle Vanya on stage. Vanya and his niece Sonia face in the same direction in Sonia's monologue. It's quite rare that Vanya and Sonia put their bodies this way in the last scene of Uncle Vanya. In other stages or films, you can see Sonia facing Vanya sitting next to him or standing behind him. Here, Sonia moves her arms just in front of Vanya's face from the back, as if she is holding a steering wheel. Then Misaki's close-up shot. This play was directed by Kafuku, so Misaki might have realized that the last scene was his message to her, saying thank you for the ride to the destination he never anticipated. Okay, now let me wrap up today's review. Drive My Car is a film about ambiguity. It's the ambiguity of Oto's persona. It's never resolved in the film. Rather, the film shows Kafuku taking a step forward without resolving it. It's also a film about paradox, the paradox of selfhood that Kafuku experiences to accept Oto. And Uncle Vanya plays a crucial role for that. and it's also about body. It describes how Kafuku transforms his body by sharing a ride with Misaki and yielding himself to Chekhov's text. Kafuku's acceptance of Oto would never have happened without those bodily experiences. In Murakami's original story, Kafuku's experience and the motif of Uncle Vanya are separated. This separation structurally corresponds to the seemingly contradictory images of Oto. Kafuku is a real person, and Uncle Vanya is a fiction. Oto's persona as a loving wife is real, and her persona as a betraying wife is not real. As far as Kafuku doesn't perform the play, Oto's two personas are not put together, and he stopped looking at it in a typically Murakamish manner. So we can say that Murakami stopped driving and left the car there. By contrast, Hamaguchi believes there is a road ahead. Of course, it doesn't mean that you will finally reach the point where you can find the true persona of Oto. That's impossible, and Kafuku knew that. But there's still a different way to accept it. That's acting. If you experience the moment of paradox and ambiguity in yourself, you'll probably see other people's ambiguity as acceptable. Then probably you can remove the final thorn in your heart. This difference looks as small as a thorn, but it's actually huge. Okay, that's my take of this film. What do you think? Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.